Hello, I'm Dr. Rick Merritt. Welcome to this discussion about fallacies in reasoning. Whenever you hear or read an argument, you do need to be aware of possible fallacies. We will discuss 7 fallacies, although there are many, many more. I do want to warn you, the discussion on fallacies is not to turn you into a gotcha type person where you shout out the opponent's argument is fallacious. The goal is to help you avoid logical fallacies in your own arguments. It's also hoped you will recognize fallacies in other people's arguments and deal with them tactfully. Let's get started exploring the wild and wonderful world of logical fallacies. Let's start with post hoc ergo propter hoc, also known as false cause. The Latin phrase can be loosely translated as after this, therefore because of this. An example would be blaming everything bad on the new person. A company starts losing value 6 months after the new CEO takes over. The new CEO is not solely responsible. She or he may have exasperated the situation, but that was not the only cause of it. The same with those ushered into political office and 2 weeks later a major negative event happens. It's probably not the fault of the new office holder. Also note, the same applies to good things happening as well. Another example is to make the claim that 95% of people involved in vehicular accidents have consumed baked goods at least 24 hours prior to the accident. Thus, consuming baked goods causes vehicular accidents. To avoid this type of argument, make sure you are not reasoning that something happened simply because of an event that happened just before or in close proximity to that event. Events close to one another do not mean they caused each other. False analogy is next up for our discussion. This is the ever-popular apples and oranges comparison. For example, Scipio Chiaramonte, a professor of philosophy and mathematics at the University of Pisa, claimed in 1633, animals which move have limbs and muscles. The earth has no limbs and muscles, hence it does not move. Obviously, the good professor was incorrect. That is because developing an analogy of animals on Earth to how the solar system works is a false analogy. When you make comparisons, be certain they are apt, and you really are comparing like things. You can compare one debate class to another because they are like things. However, you really can't make an analogy between a debate class and a class on how to ride a motorcycle. While logic and strong thinking may be required in both, the outcomes of each are somewhat different. False sign is the next fallacy we will discuss. As you recall from the reasoning video, reasoning from a sign is a valid form of logic. However, when we reason from a false sign, we invalidate that logic. We may note that rapidly rising gas prices and believe that is the sign of a failing economy. It may be, but it may not be. Using a single sign to make a complex determination, such as the health of an economy, can result in a false sign fallacy. Also, I realize the stock market is not the sole indicator of the health of an economy. It's included here to show how that connection may be made. A doctor would not make a complex diagnosis based on a single sign. He would treat the most serious symptoms, such as a completely blocked artery in the heart, and then look at the big picture to determine the health issue that caused the blockage. We should take the same approach when dealing with complex societal issues. Let's move on from fallacies that look at logical but in reality are based in falsehoods. Causal reductionism is the next fallacy we will discuss. This is what I call bumper sticker philosophy. You take a very complex issue and boil it down into a catchphrase. I would venture to guess that you could think of a few as you are watching this. One that comes to my mind is guns don't kill people, people kill people. The issue of gun control and the Second Amendment is a very complex issue. It can't be solved by a catchy phrase on a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. Think about this the next time you are tempted to express your argument in one trite phrase. Let's move on to our next fallacy, and that is slippery slope, also known as the camel's nose is in the tent. The idea is if something is allowed to happen, that will cause other things to happen in rapid succession. The concept of the camel's nose came from a tale of a person sleeping in a tent on a cold desert night while the camel was outside. The camel stuck its nose in the tent, begging to be allowed simply to have his nose in the tent. The occupant complied. Later, the camel asked to be allowed to put his head in the tent. Again, the occupant complied. This give and take happened over the next few hours, and by morning, the camel was snug in the tent and the human was sleeping in the desert cold. Therefore, you have the concept of one thing leading to another. This is also the domino theory. In the 1960s, it was the threat of communism, and if we allowed nations to be taken over by communists, then the rest would fall like dominoes. For example, we could take the idea that students must be able to pass a comprehensive test before receiving a degree. One could take the idea that tests then may be required to get jobs or to start families or maybe even an entrance exam to the mall. Of course, this is a ludicrous example, but you will find arguments like this all around you. Be on the lookout for the camel's nose. Our penultimate fallacy is ad hominem. This is the attack on the person, or in this case, I suppose, the goose, rather than the issue. For examples of this, spend a few minutes listening to pretty much any campaign ad. For example, in a presidential campaign, one nominee accused his opponent of having a hideous, hermaphroditical character which has neither the force and firmness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman. The opponent shot back by noting the other nominee as a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, the son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by an Virginia mulatto father. Do you know these competitors for the office of the U.S. presidency? If you guessed Thomas Jefferson, who offered the first comments, and John Adams, who responded in kind, you're correct. Thus, the concept of negative advertising and ad hominem attacks in politics has a long history. When you see an ad attacking the character of the opposition or the fact that the opposing candidate owns several homes so he or she can't understand the common voter, you are witnessing an ad hominem attack. The best thing to do is your own research. Unlike the 1800 election, we have the advantage, and perhaps disadvantage, of the Internet. So do your homework and find out where the candidates stand on the issues and be an informed voter. The final fallacy is either or. This fallacy is usually pretty easy to spot since it usually contains the words either or in the argument. This fallacy indicates there are only two sides to the issue, as demonstrated by this signpost. As noted earlier, most issues are very complex and can't really be reduced to two sides. Thus, this fallacy is a relative of causal reductionism. Here's a great example of the either-or fallacy.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Did you spot the fallacy and where it was used? I hope you heard President Johnson say, either we must love each other or we must die. These words, spoken quite dramatically, indicate only two options. Loving each other is a wonderful sentiment. However, there are more than two options to not annihilating humankind, as have been pointed out over the half-century since that ad aired. That brings us to the end of this discussion. As I noted at the outset, there are many, many more fallacies. Read the fallacies list that's available online. We'll be exploring these in more detail. That's it for this session. This is Dr. Rick Merritt. I'll see you in class.